There's a bird at your feeder right now, or there was this morning. You probably glanced at it for a few seconds, that quick little flutter, and then went right back to your coffee. But here's what you didn't see. That bird used to wake up before you did and fly nearly 2 miles just looking for breakfast. It used to read the forest like it was born knowing the language, which bark hid beetles underneath, which branch had a hidden seed stash, which patch of ground smelled like earthworms after rain. It had a whole system, built over millions of years, and now it just waits. Same perch, same time, every single morning. You thought you were helping it, and honestly, maybe you were at first. But something else has been happening underneath all of that. Something quieter, something that's been building for decades without anyone really noticing. And by the time we're done here, you're going to look at that little bird in a completely different way. Most people just assume a well-fed bird is a thriving bird. That's the natural conclusion, right? More food means better survival, stronger populations, a healthier ecosystem overall. But that's not what the research is actually showing. What scientists are finding, and this is the part that kind of stops you in your tracks, is that easy, reliable food isn't just feeding birds. It's changing them, quietly, gradually, at a level most of us never even think to look at, the foraging instinct. That deep, ancient drive to explore, to search, to figure things out. That's one of the oldest survival tools in the animal kingdom. 50 million years of refinement. And it turns out that instinct works just like any other skill. Stop using it and it starts to fade. Not over generations necessarily, sometimes within a single bird's lifetime. Here's the part most people miss entirely. That feeder in your yard? To the bird's brain, it doesn't register as a gift. It registers as a shortcut, and the brain, always trying to conserve energy, always looking for the path of least resistance, takes that shortcut every single time. Without hesitation, without looking back. And look, this matters more than it might sound right now, because we're not just talking about one bird acting a little different in your yard. We're talking about a ripple effect, biological, ecological, generational, something that stretches way beyond your backyard fence. When foraging instincts weaken, birds don't just get lazy, they start to forget. They forget how to read the forest. They forget migration cues that their ancestors followed for thousands of years. They forget how to teach any of it to their young. And a forest, the actual living, breathing forest, starts to feel that absence. Because birds aren't just creatures passing through an ecosystem. They're part of how it runs. Seed dispersers, pest controllers, canopy architects, they have jobs, real ones. When they stop showing up for those jobs, the whole system starts to quietly come apart. And the part that honestly sits with me, the part that's a little uncomfortable, is that the hand that set all of this in motion was kind. It was generous. It was just trying to help. It was yours. If you've never looked at birds quite this way before, stick around. Because what's coming next genuinely shifts something, and if that feels like the kind of thing worth holding on to, subscribing really does take about 2 seconds. Just putting that out there. Okay, picture this. A house finch, first morning it finds your feeder. It's cautious, circles a few times, finally lands, grabs one seed and shoots off instantly. Threat check done, reward logged. But something happens in that small brain the moment the reward hits. Dopamine fires. And here's the thing. It's the same basic neurochemical loop that runs human behavior. The slot machine pull, the social media refresh. That little spike of there it is, birds have it too. And once the feeder gets connected to that feeling, that reliable, consistent hit of reward, it becomes almost impossible to walk away from. Within days, the bird's whole foraging range shrinks. I mean, why fly 2 miles when everything you need is 30 feet from where you slept? The brain starts optimizing. The neural pathways tied to wide-range exploration, to curiosity, to searching, to problem-solving, they start seeing less traffic. And in neuroscience, less traffic means less upkeep. Use it or lose it. That's not a saying. That's literally how brains work. The perch stops being a pit stop. It becomes the whole destination. And the bird that used to navigate an entire woodland with precision now maps a space roughly the size of your yard. And this is where it gets genuinely strange. Behavioral changes, Given enough time and enough generations, don't stay behavioral. They go physical. Researchers studying great tits in the UK, one of the longest continuous datasets in ornithology, found something they weren't really expecting. Birds living near supplemental feeders were growing slightly different beaks than birds in rural areas, slightly longer, better shaped for pulling seeds out of a tube, less suited for peeling bark, or probing crevices, or doing the kind of hunting that a real forest actually demands. Evolution doesn't have to be slow, not when the pressure is strong enough. And the pressure of easy food, constant, reliable, effortless, turns out to be pretty relentless. What looks like adaptation, and technically it is, also looks, from a different angle, like subtraction. The bird gets better at one very specific thing, and gradually worse at everything else. And everything else is exactly what survival in the wild requires. This is what researchers mean by functional extinction. The species doesn't vanish, it just becomes a version of itself that can't make it without you. Still here, still flying, just dependent. In a way that has no easy way back. Here's the humanized version. A bird that's out there foraging isn't just finding food, it's reading the world. The forest is a language, and foraging is how birds stay fluent in it. The angle of light coming through the canopy tells them what season it is. The insects present on a particular tree tell them something about that tree's health. The alarm calls of nearby species, the way other birds are moving, all of that is building a real-time picture. Predator activity, weather shifts, territory lines. A foraging bird is constantly processing, constantly updating this internal map that keeps it alive. A bird sitting at your feeder is processing almost none of that. Studies tracking cognition in urban bird populations have found real measurable declines in spatial memory among feeder-dependent birds. The hippocampus, the part of the brain that handles navigation and memory, is actually smaller in birds that don't need to remember where food is, because the food is always in the same place. Why build the map if the destination never moves? And here's the part that really stays with you. When those birds eventually do need to navigate, a storm, a displacement, the feeder suddenly disappearing one morning, they can't. The map isn't rusty. It isn't incomplete. It's just gone. Neurologically gone. They're lost in a forest their grandparents knew like their own heartbeat. There's a hawk that knows your neighborhood. It's been watching the feeder birds for weeks, and it's figured something out, something that used to be genuinely hard to figure out in the wild. That prey gathers, predictably, at the same spot, at the same time, every single day. In a natural foraging environment, birds are scattered, moving constantly, unpredictable, hard to target. The energy a predator has to spend hunting them is high, and the success rate is relatively low. That tension, that balance, is what kept populations stable for millions of years. The feeder breaks that balance entirely. Researchers have actually documented more predation events near supplemental feeding stations, not because hawk populations have grown, but because the hawks that already exist are hunting far more efficiently now. The prey gathered itself in one place, dropped its guard, got physically softer from months of low-effort living. And here's the part people miss. The feeder didn't just change how the birds behave, it changed how the hawk behaves. And that shift ripples through the entire local food web in both directions, in ways most of us never see coming. Sunflower seeds are basically fast food for birds, calorie-dense, immediately satisfying, and nutritionally incomplete in ways that don't show up right away, which is maybe the most dangerous kind of problem there is. Wild bird diets are genuinely complex, dozens of insect species each delivering specific proteins and fats that seeds simply can't replicate, berries that ripen at exactly the moment a bird's body needs antioxidants for migration, minerals from specific soils, grit from specific water sources. The wild diet isn't random. It's prescription, written slowly over millions of years of coevolution between birds and the landscapes they lived in. Feeder food isn't that, and the gaps, while subtle, stack up. Researchers looking at eggshell thickness, which is actually a reliable marker of calcium status, found measurable thinning in feeder-dependent bird populations. Calcium matters enormously during egg production, and birds that don't forage widely just don't encounter the mineral-rich invertebrates that provide it, so the eggs form. But they're a little weaker. The chicks hatch, but they start slightly behind. each generation absorbing a small nutritional deficit and passing it to the next generation as their new baseline. It's slow, it's invisible, and it's happening right now in the yard of nearly every person who genuinely thinks they're doing something good. And then winter comes, and this is where it all gets very real, very fast. The birds that spent spring and summer at the feeder never built the behavioral reserves that actual foraging creates. They didn't push their territorial range outward, so they have no mental map of backup food sources. They didn't keep up the physical conditioning that serious sustained flight demands. And their foraging instincts, dulled by months of everything being easy, don't just switch back on because the temperature dropped. Then sometimes a family moves. Someone gets sick. Someone just decided not to refill the feeder this winter, and the food is gone. The wild birds know exactly what to do. They've been practicing the whole time. The feeder birds land on an empty perch, and they wait. Because waiting is what worked. Because waiting is what worked. Because waiting always worked before. Here's the humanized version. Here's the thing about skills. They don't vanish all at once. They just fade, quietly, slowly, across generations, until one day the knowledge is simply gone. And not even in a dramatic way, just absent, because it was never written down anywhere. It was live. Passed from parent to chick through behavior, through watching. 3 young birds sitting on a branch and seeing its parent work the underside of a leaf in a way that no feeder ever asked for. When that demonstration stops, the knowledge stops with it. Ornithologists have a name for this: cultural extinction. And it's exactly what it sounds like: a population that's biologically alive, still flying, still singing, but behaviorally hollow. Present in the landscape but no longer truly connected to it. Unable to function in the ecosystem they were literally built for, because the skills that ecosystem required were practiced by their grandparents, half forgotten by their parents, and never learned by them at all. The birds at your feeder aren't failing. That's the thing. They're actually succeeding at the world you built for them. They figured it out. They adapted. The real question is, what happens when that world changes? Go back to that feeder for a second, the one in your yard. The one you fill on Sunday mornings, mostly on autopilot, without really stopping to think about it. The bird that shows up there isn't wild the way its ancestors were wild. It's something new. Something shaped by instinct, yes, but also shaped by its environment. And shaped quietly by you. You became part of its ecology without ever signing up for that role, without ever being asked. And that's not a reason to feel guilty. Honestly, it isn't. It's just a reason to be aware. Because the hand that feeds also shapes. And once you know that, really know it, feeding means something different than it did before.